Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Pralada Jani.
Pralada Jani.
Hiranyakashipu Vaksha.
Hiranyakashipu Vaksha.
Hiranyakashipu Vaksha.
Hiranyakashipu Vaksha.
Hiranyakashipu Vaksha.
Hiranyakashipu Vaksha.
Shiratankanakalaye.
Shiratankanakalaye.
Ito Nrisimha Parato Nrisimha.
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 Yato Yato Yamita To Nrisimha.
Yato Yato Yamita To Nrisimha.
Bahir Nrisimha Hirare 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 Nrisimha.
Nrisimha Madhim Sharanam Prapare.
Narasimha Madhim Sharanam Prapare.
Kava Kava Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Singam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringam Keshavadita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare.
Karakara Kapalavare Nakam Adbhuta Singam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringam Keshavadita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare.
Jaya Nrsimha Dev, Nrsimha Dev, Nrsimha Dev, Jaya Nrsimha Dev.
Jaya Nrsimha Dev, Jaya Nrsimha Dev, Jaya Nrsimha Dev, Jaya Nrsimha Dev.
Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj.
Jaya Kala Maharaj, Jaya Kala Maharaj, Jaya Kala Maharaj, Jaya Kala Maharaj.
Right. Om Jnana Tamarandasya Gunanjana Shalakaya. Tasmai Sri Guru Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My spiritual master has kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachadari Nirvishesha Shanjivadi Paspatadi Shataya. Namaste Jivanandaya Dasaya Vandachari Prabhupada Valavaya Singhasaravane. Agyana Dvanta Gamanam Pashtita Paditadmanam Gyana Guru Taya Chitarine Shashay Namaha. So, tonight we'll be talking about the real self and the false self, and how we really need a fundamental belief in actually all traditions throughout the world, one of the most fundamental understandings is that a spiritual experience will change our lives, that we need a real spiritual experience in life. All we need is one sometimes, just one genuine spiritual experience to have a genuine shift in heart. And unless and until we have a genuine spiritual experience, we will not be satisfied, or we won't know what to do in life. We won't have a change in heart. So we need to have a genuine spiritual experience. And not only do we need to have a genuine spiritual experience, but we need to have a spiritual experience regularly. On a regular basis, we should be having very profound spiritual experiences. And so this is really what the world needs when we analyze our personal lives and the lives of those in the world. Everybody needs to have a moment, and a moment where they can touch God, where they can feel, experience God. And in that moment, one develops compassion, one develops love, one develops forgiveness, one develops so many wonderful qualities simply by that experience of touching God. And so everybody's seeking this spiritual experience ultimately in the search for pleasure and the search for love. The search for pleasure, starting with the most basic types of pleasure, sex life, food, so many things, and ending in the experience of Krishna. That is innate in the spiritual soul. The soul is seeking pleasure. Anandamaya abhyasa. We're all seeking various forms of pleasure, various forms of happiness. And so we have a belief, if we analyze ourselves, we have a belief that when we find pleasure, it will change us. When we find that goodie at the end of the road, it's going to change us. And I remember growing up, there's so many things to do when you're growing up. There's so many firsts to have. You're going to have all these first experiences, and that after I have that experience, I'll be happy. And as we go on in our lives, we have so many experiences. We find that none of those experiences were what they were made out to be. So there is a seeking pleasure that happens. And so in that way, depending on our conditioning and depending on our circumstances, we formulate a plan by which we can have pleasure, by which we can find happiness. And so many times in what we're experiencing in the world today, especially amongst the youths, is that people are depressed. Young people are very, very depressed, very, very anxious and depressed because they're living out these pleasurable experiences at a young age, and they're finding that they're not satisfying, and they're not presented with any alternative. And even the mundane pleasures of goodness that are presented within the world, such as having a family, are so difficult in this age. I was just hearing, we were talking about Mother Sundami this morning, and she was saying that this house next door to us went on sale for $450,000. No, $500,000. $500,000 for a house on First Avenue. And I'm thinking, that is a very big discouragement for those wanting to have a family. I mean, how are you going to afford it? You pretty much have to work hard, you have to grind. I'm not discouraging family life. I'm encouraging it actually, because it is one of the pleasures in this world that is of a higher nature for sure. But that's so hard. And so one of the worst symptoms of a very downtrodden person, some people say a depression, sadness, suicidal tendencies, but the bottom of the barrel is nihilism. When you get to the point of nihilism, then you are really in the sickness. Nihilism means I don't care about anything anymore. My Guru Maharaj often speaks that hate is not the opposite of love, that indifference is the opposite of love. That when I am hateful of somebody, it means I still have feelings for them. Actually, I still love them. But indifference is when you don't care anymore. And if you've ever been indifferent towards someone or had someone be indifferent toward you, that is very painful. That's a very painful feeling, because now I've really come to the point where this person does no longer care for me. And so That's true pain. So people are suffering. And without that spiritual pleasure, how can we become happy? How can we find real happiness? And so we need this. We fundamentally need, as human beings, to have a spiritual experience. It's not a extracurricular activity. It's a fundamental need, just like we need food, we need water, we need friends, we need to have a spiritual experience in life. If we don't have one, then we're going to be very sick people in our consciousness and in our psyches. So with that being said, there are two selves experiencing the world simultaneously. There's the real self and the false self, which is called ahankara. The real self is called the atma, and the false self is called the ahankar, or the false ego. Many, many ancient traditions, besides just the Hare Krishna movement, speak of these two selves, the ahankara and the atma. And many people are living in the false self. And Krishna explains that if one lives in the false ego, they'll be lost. And that doesn't mean like I lost my way in the store, or I lost my way, with my GPS turned off and I lost my way. That means I am lost. I don't even know who I am. We feel bad for those who have amnesia, right? When they wake up and they don't know who they are, and they don't know who their mom or dad is, and they don't know anything. We feel bad for those people, but we're in a much similar circumstance. We don't know who we are. And therefore, immense suffering befalls us. So the Bhagavad Gita, 1854, says, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nasochati Nakangshati Samasarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. I'm just going to read the actual translation so that we can, and the purport. Since all devotees here, we'll do a little more Bhagavatami. One who is thus transcendently situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed to every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. So, Krishna is saying here that that when one is in the real self, the Brahma Bhuta stage, when one has realized himself as a spiritual being, the false self is thinking I'm this body, thinking I'm this mind, thinking I'm the things I've done in the past, thinking I'm the things I'm going to do in the future. Sometimes we can get over I'm this body. And if we're really special, we can get over I'm this mind. Very hard to get over I'm not the things I've done. But much harder than that is to realize I'm not the things I'm going to do in the future. Because in that way, all four of those circumstances, the past, the present, the body, and the mind, all four of those circumstances take us away from the genuine self. They take us away from the moment because we're thinking about the future. Even devotees, we can fall into this trap very easily, right? I'm going to do this in the future. I'm going to, do this service. I'm going to be married. I'm going to take sannyas. I'm going to do so many things. And in that way, the plans take us completely away from Krishna. They take us completely away from the real self. And that stifles our ability to have a spiritual experience. And what to speak if we don't have deep japa, if we don't have good practices, then the anxiety will raise and raise and raise and raise. And although we are devotees, we are thinking of Krishna, Krishna is our goal, we're not conscious enough, we're not powerful enough to actually realize and to have that power, that establishment in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, we should understand with consciousness what is the false self, what is the real self. So there are characteristics of the false self. One of them is judgment. The false self is full of judgment. He's judging every circumstance, judging people, judging circumstances, judging the self, judging myself, judging my own performance. And so we see that the world today is really living in the false self. Why is the false self full of judgment? Because if I think I'm a body, and if I think I'm the things I do, this is what I'm going to focus on, is that we may have some intellectual understanding I'm not this body, but a lot of times we identify with our actions. We think we're the doers. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have choice. Don't think that because we're not the doers, we don't have choice. But in a moment, we can be beyond our bad choices. In one moment of actual Krishna consciousness, all of our bad choices are erased, and we become situated in the self. However, don't think that because I'm not the things I do, I don't have choice, I'm not responsible. But when we think that I'm the false self and I'm doing so many things, there's always going to be a sense of insecurity there, you see? Because you will never be good enough in the material platform. You will never be pretty enough. You will never be smart enough. You will never be smart enough. You will never perform enough. You will never perform your religious practices enough to where you feel satisfied in your ego. You can't say that I'm, like I've come to the stage of chanting 128 rounds a day, and now I am, eating a grain of rice a day. I'm eating a grain of rice for every round I chant, and that's all I eat. Like Vishnu Priya, the wife of Lord Chaitanya, she used to do that. And so we can't, if we're judging ourselves materially based on even our spiritual practice, we won't really have a genuinely wonderful life. So we're going to always judge others because we have to see where we're at. I have to judge myself compared to you. And therefore, because of that, I cannot see Krishna. I will never see Krishna in that state. Because that puts me in the false self. Krishna says, right? There's a nice verse in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, one who sees the super soul equally situated in the heart of every living entity no longer degrades himself by his mind. So in other words, when we see Krishna in everybody's heart, when we see the real self in others, we don't degrade ourselves. When we see people as their bodies, we may think we're degrading them, but actually we're degrading ourselves. Because if I compare myself to someone on a material level, I'm immediately putting myself on the material platform. I'm immediately thinking I'm this body, which takes the beautiful spirit soul full of knowledge and bliss, who you are, that beautiful, wonderful, incredible part and parcel of Krishna, that immediately becomes reduced to whatever it is, it's nothing. Whatever the ultimate result of whatever it is just ash, stool, or manure. That's the body. The false ego is just going to be forgotten, right? It's going to be pages in a book at best. So the false self is full of judgment due to apparent differences. One thing about the false self is he can't solve any problems. The false self can't solve any of the problems. We're always thinking about trying to solve problems. As you grow up, the problems become more and more intense. Right? There's always more and more problems. Everything's getting more and more intense. And my mind is more and more perplexed by problems. And we try to solve them by adjusting our false self. If I do this, then I will solve the problem. And that doesn't just mean on a material level. That means on an individual level. That's also a collective level. Collectively, if we see that we're the false self, then we're trying to solve things falsely, then we're never going to find the solution. So there's one verse in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam where it said, I think it's the Python sage actually. It's either him or Narada Muni. He says that the incredible thing about this material world is that in trying to stop our miseries, we create more miseries. What a trick. And that is this really is the greatest prison of all time. In trying to satisfy the mind and the senses, we create more and more miseries. Therefore, it just behooves us to stop acting as a mind, stop acting as a body, start acting as a soul, start acting as a soul. It behooves us. So the false self can't solve any problems with the false self because the false self is the cause of the problem. So therefore, the false self isn't intelligent enough to solve the problems. And the false self is full of self-interest. He's always thinking about himself. He's always thinking about himself because the false self is always trying to obtain something, always trying to attain something, always trying to improve. because the false self naturally feels insecure. And we find that the toughest, most powerful men in the world exhibit the signs of the greatest insecurity. I don't have to name world leaders. We all have our favorites. But they exhibit so much symptoms of insecurity. They're not actually secure in themselves because it's all false. It's a false self. Gaur Shakti. Yeah, it's Gaur Shakti's warning, right? No, it's cricket. No, we really live with this constant guy in our minds that's telling us, I got to change this. You better do that. You got to do this. You better do that. Why did you do that? Why did you do this? I should do this better. In that way, if we listen to him, and he can hijack this false ego, Mr. False Ego mind, consciousness, he can hijack our spiritual life too and make us think that somehow or another, by following everything as nicely as possible, I'm somehow going to be saved. That somehow will make me a spiritually enlightened person. I'm not saying that we shouldn't follow rules and regulations in spiritual life. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that if we go about it with the wrong conception, then it will be shrama eva hi kevalam. It'll be useless. So we're full of self-interest as the false self. He's full of interest in himself and wants to control. Wanting to control things. Why does he want to control things? Why does the false self want to control things? Because there's no stability in that life. There's no stability. There's only false senses of stability. I remember growing up thinking like that all these things that we do when we are told like we're going to get jobs and we're going to get wives and we're going to do things, like thinking like those were stable things, And like as I've experienced life, that I realized like the more you have, the more just fearful you become because it's just never stable. It's never stable.
And you got to worry about losing it.
You always got to worry about losing it. And there's no place where you can think that, there's no amount of perfection in the material world that can make us feel like we're not going to lose what we have. And so we got to control things. And that control freak is a constant source of anxiety. I have to control the circumstances in my life somehow or another. So false self, he wants to control. He feels superior. He feels like he's superior to others. Or he falsely feels he's superior to others, just like Sufi. He's a great example of a false ego. He literally puffs up. And so he feels superior to all the other birds in there. But in fact, he is by far not superior. Yeah, I'm sure.
Say that too loud. He's going to punch inside that door.
He doesn't. I don't even go in there anymore. I just feed him outside. Yeah. No, because, like, he's in there with the two peacocks, beautiful birds, mode of goodness. And he's like, so he has to, like, make himself seem like he's somehow more beautiful than the two peacocks and the pheasant, which are actually very beautiful birds. So we always want to feel superior and righteous. The false self can want to feel righteous. I'm the righteous one. And there's, at least in our tradition and very much in the Christian tradition also, there's no sense that righteousness is the end goal. And righteousness can take so many forms. False righteousness, that I chant the best rounds, I do the best this, I'm the most careful in my service, whatever it is, or I'm the most, kind, most humble. These are all false senses of righteousness. We can take them the wrong way. It's because I got to feel like I am doing it right. I got to feel like somehow or another I got to please the wizard in the sky. We got to please the sky wizard, right? This type of religion is there. This is the religion most people grow up with. We got to please the sky wizard, or else we're going to go to the horned guy. And so, that's a good starting point. It is. But you have to go past that. That all of our spiritual compulsions, so-called spiritual compulsions, are just the other side of the coin of our material compulsions. Because I've not yet accepted myself as a whole. I've not yet realized what I am and what I'm not. So I'm living a performance-based life, which is always destined to fail. And therefore, there's no peace in my heart. There's no peace in my heart because it's all performance-based. And so there's two things that happen. One is very serious about spiritual life. They become morose. And if one is not so serious about spiritual life, I just, cover it over with friends and, I go just talk nonsense and, mundane conversation. I don't really have a very serious spiritual practice going on. Like, I'm not really meditating on, this is what I want to do. This is who I am. Unless if I'm feeling up and I'm good, I'm pleasing the space wizard, I can, appear like that. But if I'm not, then, I got to cover it. I either got to be depressed or I got to cover it over with, all kinds of different distractions. That can take the shape of social interaction. That can take the shape of social media. That can take the shape of, intoxication. It can take the shape of seeking out various sexual relationships and or, plutonic relationships that are based in distraction of my actual spiritual goals. So in that way, we, can't deal with that. And so he wants safety. The false self wants to be safe. He wants security. And we hear how deeply immersed the world is in this sense of security, especially, the United States talk about security and, billions and billions and billions of dollars that will ultimately fail. I mean, this country is going to fall at some point. It could be 10,000 years, but it will fall. There's no doubt about it. There's never been an empire that stayed around. Never. So it's a matter of time. But we have to have security. We have to make it last as long as possible. And at the cost of the happiness of so many people in this country and in other countries. At the cost of happiness, we will maintain our false sense of self. At the cost of peace, I will maintain my false sense of self. At the cost of anything, I will maintain this. I will keep this going. This illusion, I must perpetuate my illusion because I cannot face who I am. And so therefore, he's always insecure. And he has to defend the false ego. We have to defend the self in so many ways. We're always having to defend. So we don't want to, in that way, the false self makes us compulsive. We can be compulsively bad, so-called bad, meat eating, illicit sex, intoxication, anger, greed, or we can be compulsively good. Compulsion is not spirituality. Compulsion is the modes of material nature. So therefore, without a genuine spiritual experience, there is no real happiness. That's not the language of mystical people, spiritual people. And even in our Krishna consciousness movement, if you have the opportunity to spend time with highly advanced devotees, you'll see that they're not living a performance-based life. You'll see that those who are very performance-based, we have them here, we have them other places, we have those who are very spiritually advanced also, that they may appear like they're doing the whole process. Someone asked me the other day, why is it this person does everything but never appears happy and has so many challenges in their life? Because they're living a performance-based spiritual life. They're thinking that because I'm pleasing the space wizard, please forgive my facetiousness, but it's funny. But because I'm pleasing the space wizard, I'm more advanced than everybody else. Don't you know that I am the best? I should be, but yet we see that those who have developed the actual real self, they're living a relationship with God. They're not living like some slave or some, rule-based thing. They're living in a relationship. And the rules and regulations are tools to help develop that relationship. So religion means to go from the false ego to the real ego. That's what religion is. There's nothing else. That's what real spirituality is. It means going from false ego to real ego. Going from, the high self to the low self. Going from matter to spirit. This is the real religion. This is the real process of religion. But okay. Going from the real self to the false self. So if this goal is not attained, it's useless. And so therefore, Sutta Goswami in the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 1, canto 1, chapter 2, verse number 8 says, Dharma swanushtita pumsam vishvakshena kata shuyaha notpadyadati ratim shrama eva kevalam. That Dharma swanushtita pumsam, those dharmas, religions that we're doing in human society, Dharma swanushtita pumsam vishvakshena kata shuyaha rati, without this attachment to Vishvakshena, to the actual message of Godhead, to the actual message of Krishna, without attachment to that, Shrama Eva Kevalam, they're useless in this life and the next. It's useless labor. It's genuine useless labor. So the sense that I'm not playing the game right. I'm not playing the game right. And if you play the game right, then somehow or another you are, you're good, you're saved. And there this salvation illusion comes up, this illusion of salvation, that somehow or another I'm not good enough, and therefore I need to be saved. And being saved means I'm better than those who are not saved. You see how the false ego tricks us? That somehow or another I am better than those who are, I gotta be better than someone somehow or another. Somehow or another, this guy has to be better than someone. So the salvation illusion comes out. And therefore the Bhagavatam says, Dharma projito kaitavo paramo niramatsaranam satam. That this Srimad Bhagavatam completely rejects those kaitava dharmas, those cheating religions. One of them is the salvationist religions, the liberation-based religions, the economic-based religions, the sense gratification-based religions, the being a good person philosophy, the money religions. The Bhagavatam rejects all these and propounds the highest truth, which is reality distinguished from illusion for the benefit of all, and is for those who are niramatsaranam, those who are non-envious, those who have become contented in themselves. So this is the nature of genuine spiritual life. And so we're about salvation, we're about relationship, we're about love. So in opposition to that, the real self is full of worth. He doesn't have to obtain anything. Because Krishna is here, right? Is Krishna in the past? Yes. Krishna in the present? In the future? Yes. But where can we see Krishna? Here. Krishna is right here. So spiritual experience is the now. I know this is like language devotees don't generally use, but we can put it in the devotional context because they genuinely want it. They want to live in the present, but they don't know how. All the New Agers and they want to live in the present, but they don't know how. Krishna is here. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that in one of his songs. He says, let me live for the times of now. Because the real self is full of worth. And it should be understood, this is a very kind of mind-blowing revelation about God. It's simple as it is, and as prominent as it is our philosophy, we don't really speak about it so much. So I was going to just share this nice verse in the Bhagavad Gita. Very sweet verse here. Arjuna has a little bit of a realization about Krishna. And he says something very profound. Arjuna says, Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitam, Paramam Bhavam, Purusham Shashvatam Devyam, Adi Devam Ajam Vibhum. He says, you are the supreme Brahman. So you are the supreme absolute truth. That's what Brahman is. You are the supreme spirit. You are the ultimate abode. Param Brahma, Param Dhamma. So wait a second. How is a person an abode? How does this make sense? Can I go live in a person? Like, are you an abode, Sean? Can I go live inside Sean? That'd be a pretty joyful place, like all kinds of, yes, that's true. All kinds of, beautiful paintings and jolly butterflies. I imagine that's what Sean Dom is probably like.
What's very divine.
Yeah, I'm in. I'm in.
We're all going.
You wouldn't want to live inside me. I'll tell you that. Not a very fun place to be. I live there. I know. Kirtan Dham. The ultimate supreme abode, the purifier, the purest, the absolute truth, the eternal divine person. You are the primal God, transcendental and original, and you are unborn and all-pervading beauty. So Krishna is the Param Brahma, Param Dhamma. Param Dham. The revelation is that God is not just a person. He's a place. God is a place. And so if we can live in that place now, that's the point we can make here. If we live in Krishna's shelter, the person Krishna, we also live in Goloka Vrindavan, Krishna's place. That's here. Goloka Vrindavan is here. The Dham is actually all pervasive. That's why you can have a new Vraja Dham, new Vrindavan Dham. For those who have the eyes to see, every place where the worship of the Lord is going on is a holy Dham. But you can't access it. Whereas in the Boma Vrindavan on earth, it's very easy to access certain places. But actually, this is also a holy Dham. We can see. So God is a place, Param Brahma, Param Dhamma. And in that way, we can have a wonderful spiritual experience, you see. That's the way to have a wonderful spiritual experience. We have to live in God. Through Him, with Him, in Him. These kind of things used in the Christian world, right? In Christ, through Christ, with Christ. We hear that sometimes. So in the same way, in the similar line of thought, with Krishna, through Krishna, in Krishna, for Krishna. This is Krishna consciousness. And so the real self relates based on not what you are. The real self lives based on what you are, not what you do. So it's a big sad thing for a lot of people to realize that what you do is not so much the point here. What you are is so much more than what you do. That's why Krishna can say things like apichet siddharacharo bhajate mama nanyubak sadareva samantaviha samyag yovishito saha. Krishna can say, and even if you are the most abominable, even if you've done the most horrible thing imaginable, if you're a devotee, sadareva samantaviha, I consider you a saint. Samyag yovishito saha. Maya is that we need salvation, that we need to attain something, whereas Krishna consciousness is I am actually part and parcel of Krishna. Mamaya vamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. I'm part of Krishna. What do I have to attain? Maya is that which is not covering us, making us think we're separate from Krishna. So, therefore, you are in yourself, you are perfect. You're a perfect spiritual being. You're all perfection. And so you can say, well, Kirtanesvara Gauranga Dasa, you blasphemer. We have to chant 16 rounds and follow 4 regulative principles. How could you say that? Yes. We have to live in the Krishna conscious world. So there's where we draw the line. You see, it's not what you do, it's who you are. But how do we be who we are? This is where the Gyanis get confused. The Gyanis are thinking, I'm just going to sit here so that I don't do anything I'm not. I'm just going to be. They have no engagement. And so the modes push them They can't sit down. They can't sit still. Therefore, they have to do something. So if I can't, I need to do something. I'm going to open hospitals. I'm going to do good things. But still, you think karma doesn't attack them? And therefore, we see they're doing so many good things, and then there's a scandal. Because they're in the mode of goodness. There's no mode of goodness in this world, pure mode of goodness. There's some sattva, but there's shuddha sattva. They're not in shuddha sattva. Therefore, even in the mode of goodness, there's a little bit of passion, and that little bit of passion grows and grows and grows and grows, and then there's a scandal. And then they go down, and they're big humble. And, depending on how they handle that, they just keep on taking birth. Time and time again. So the big revelation is that it is not what you do, it's who you are. So be who you are means that in Krishna consciousness, you relate to the self based on God consciousness, right? Meaning I'm relating to God. Everything I'm doing is in my actual position, that we understand I'm part and parcel of God, I'm a servant of God, and therefore let me live like that. Therefore, by chanting, by doing these processes of Krishna consciousness, I'm living in that true self. I'm living in the true self. That helps me to realize that. So we have to stop all the false self stuff first. Therefore, we have 4 regulative principles. We have regulations so that we can break ourselves out of this false conception. And in the beginning stage, it's just practice. We're chanting, it's a practice. But later on in the transcendental stage, it's pure bliss. The chanting, the goal of chanting, Prabhupada said, is more chanting. So we have to relate to Krishna all the time, rather than relating to the things of this world. So the key is who you are. And, God is a person, and he's also a place. And in relating to that personal God, we also live within that place of God, which is we talk a lot about Achincha Veda Veda Tattva, simultaneous oneness and difference from God. We really focus on the difference, which is necessary for our preaching endeavors. We don't always focus on the oneness. I'm saying blasphemous things. No. We don't always focus on the oneness. We are also one with Krishna. That means not that we are the same body as Krishna, but that we actually live in Krishna. Although we're one, we're different, we live within Krishna. We're taken over by his power, his presence, his energy, his mission, and we've surrendered to that. And we all have a desire to surrender to a higher power. We all want to surrender to a higher power. Whether that power be evil or good, we want to surrender to a higher power. And this is why we find some of these very horrible, debaucherous, almost, go so far as saying satanic activities that do take place in this world. There's a sense that I've surrendered completely to my lust and to my anger, to my wrath, to my envy, to my pride. I've surrendered so much to it that it's completely taken me over. And in that state, so many, association with dark and, grungy beings takes place. So the false self relates to Maya and the real self relates to God. So the key is love of Krishna. Krishna says, Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. He says that if you want to live on the platform of Brahman, if you want to live in the platform, if you want to live like you're not this body, if you want to live in the real self, there's only really one way to live in the real self. That is, do devotional service all the time. Completely give of yourself. In other words, perform sacrifice all the time. Sacrifice. And that way you defeat the false self, beast, Satan, whatever you want to call it. Defeat it. And we live in the real self, Krishna conscious self. And so that act of sacrifice, meaning that I'm always doing devotional service, chanting, hearing, serving Krishna, remembering Krishna, worshiping Krishna, that's the real self. That's the real life of God. And that's our real, transcendental position. So, so there's this sense that, the sinner, the sense that there's, whatever sin we've committed, we hear about these jug eyes and mud eyes, how they were completely forgiven. Why is it that they were completely forgiven? And do you think that they became, immediately, they became like in behavior or in, all these ways they became perfect overnight, that just by seeing Lord Chaitanya? Was their perfection based on just external behavior or based more on the heart? They had quit their sin in the heart. And that's a fundamental change of behavior. Not that I'm just controlling my senses, but I want to do everything, I want all types of sense gratification. So there's a fundamental change of behavior when the heart changes. And that comes from the love and the nourishment and the sweetness and the consciousness of Krishna. So therefore, by engaging in chanting Hare Krishna, engaging in service and praying to God that we have this opportunity to perform services, that we have this opportunity to live in the real self, the natural change of heart takes place. And so that's where peace is available, because I don't have to attain anything. I see my transcendental position as part and parcel of Krishna. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janaya Yashu Vairagyam Gyanam Chayadahaitukam. Sutta Goswami says in the first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd chapter, 7th verse, he says that Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha, that by engaging in Bhakti Yoga to Vasudeva genuinely Janiyat Yashu Vairagyam, one develops causeless knowledge and attachment. So by being a genuine devotee, sincere devotee, saying, I'm a servant of God and let me live in that consciousness, let me genuinely try to please Krishna, from that immediate knowledge is born, meaning that I know I'm not this body. And so in that state, one is freed from all sins. Sarvadharman parityaja mamekam sharanam bhajaham tvam sarvapapebhyo moksha shamimasuchaha. Krishna says, the surrendering process, I immediately relieve you of all sinful activities. Do not fear. 1 minute.
Have you seen that video?
Yeah. 1 minute. My Guru Maharaj often says, we won't do it in 1 minute, but we will do it. But we can do it in 1 minute. Let me say today I am a servant of Krishna. I made that resolution. Let me serve Krishna. And so, let me do it. And if we have the sincere heart, then we are perfected. We may not be able to perform all the practices immediately, but just the desire to perform such practices will allow us the opportunity. You take prasada?
Remove my card.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, good.
For Euro.
Yeah. Heart move. So anyhow, yeah. In that way, one becomes perfected. So, like we shouldn't have so much anxiety over these types of things. Let us sincerely do what we can to serve Krishna. Try to absorb ourselves. Janiyat Yashu Vairagyam. Causeless knowledge means that I know I'm not this body. And detachment. That's the peace we're looking for, that knowledge and detachment. Knowing I'm not this body and being detached from the material world. That's the genuine peace we're looking for. When you know you're not this body and you're detached, that's peacefulness. So if we just engage in bhakti yoga, not that, if I chant these rounds, somehow or another mystically, there is mystic there, I'm not denying the power of the holy name, but that, like I'm doing all the rituals and therefore I'm good because the space wizard is not going to strike me down. But if we actually genuinely try to please Krishna in any of the 9 processes of bhakti, most importantly chanting, then we're perfected. We're perfected. It's about the heart. The consciousness behind these practices is very important. Now, the chanting is mystical in that even in the aparad stage, the holy name does have spiritual potency that purifies us and allows us to get to that realized state. You see? But the real chanting at the Namabha stage and ultimately the Shuddhanam stage at that stage, one has genuine spiritual life. Omar?
How do we catch ourselves when we're acting as the false self? That should be recognized. Sometimes it feels like it's unconscious.
We have to become conscious. Got to be conscious before you're Krishna conscious. As I've been told very violently many times. What? Yeah. Yeah. No, we have to become conscious of the false self. But more importantly, we have to just make an endeavor to live in the real self. But then once again, we don't want to get caught in there's a sense that the false self is bad. He's bad. But if we know he's false, then how is he bad?
What if I'm thinking I'm acting as my true self, but I'm actually not?
You can't be anything but the real self. That's the thing.
Right.
That's the only self, actually. You see, so in that way, the false self, he has to feel like he's right. I have to feel like I'm doing it right. That's the trick. That's Maya's trick. So we do need to discipline ourselves to come to this level. We have to, I'm not denying discipline. I'm just, in a sense, encouraging devotees, that, wherever they're at, they can make progress. I'm not denying in the sense that discipline is necessary. Discipline is necessary. Srila Prabhupada says, I was just reading a purport today, where he said there's some, all the tricks of Maya, one has to sincerely serve under a spiritual master. Someone who's really situated in the real self, they can help give you that realization. Our Guru Maharaj is very much in the real self, And in that sense, he's very forgiving with himself, very real as a person. And we know that actually the genuineness of a person makes us indebted to them, that even the false self, even the real self, there's nothing said that he has to be perfect. He doesn't make mistakes. The real self can make mistakes. Why can't the real self make mistakes? Thank you. So, yeah. So we have to genuinely live as if we are already there, and we do our practices based on love of Krishna. But we still have to discipline ourselves so that we don't become absorbed in those false self activities. Greg?
Question. One of my yoga teachers says one of the problems is we're always living in what's next.
Yeah.
What's next? And that's my problem too. Even when I'm chanting with all the answers I'm thinking about. Okay, 45 minutes, I'm going to go take a walk now. Or this, I'm always thinking, I'm never right here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always thinking about what's next.
Mm-hmm.
And when I get to the what's next,
Think about what's next.
I'm thinking about, well, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, so I can never just.
We have to break that. That's the process. That's why we need disciplines. That's why we're so adamant about, we have to follow principles and have disciplines. That's why we're in that consciousness, because it's very necessary that we have disciplines to break that. And the discipline of chanting genuine japa does break that. When you chant, especially when you have a very solid program, chanting in the same place at the same time, in the same mood, we start to tune in that mood that, I'm turning off my day before I'm chanting. Now the day doesn't start until my chanting is finished. And in that consciousness, we're able to create a space in the heart and in our external lives where we can actually be in the real self for however long we need to chant a day, And as we access and we go deeper into that space, because Krishna is not just a person, he's a space. Krishna is not just a person, he's an abode. So as we enter Krishna via the holy name, we take that with us more and more throughout the day. And that manifests as becoming undisturbed. And eventually that state of Krishna consciousness just sticks with us. The chanting never stops. It continues in our head all the time. And that's the stage of ultimate enlightenment, prayer of the heart, spontaneous prayer of the heart. So we have to discipline ourselves and, focus and pray and, engineer, and that takes Krishna's intelligence, Krishna's must engineer it in such a way that we have that proper spiritual experience.
So to follow up with you, it's like a presidential press conference right now. You know, if I may ask a follow-up question.
Please.
So what you just said, the day doesn't even begin until the spiritual work is, until the chanting is done.
For
It's
me,
not like, here's the day, and I'm gonna squeeze in the chanting when I get a chance.
the spiritual practice is the primary and foremost. That's like part of my sleep schedule. There's nothing until that, because that's what matters. That's part of that surrender. Mam ekam sharanam, making Krishna number one. So number one means number one, first thing, not last thing. So chanting number one, not number last thing. So that's part of that surrender process. Krishna, make me the goal of life, make me number one, you know. And so if I'm letting, and that means that's the whole day engineering. That's something that we develop in time by just doing one thing. That let me, you know, go to bed early so I can get up early, so I can eat properly, so I don't, you know, it's all these engineerings that we're doing so that we're having the proper state of mind. And that takes prayer. We can also pray to Krishna to help us, and he will help us. He will help us. Thomas?
I've just been reflecting lately how much like a spoiled child the false self is. You know, it's always wanting something, and flitting from this to this. But because it's a child that's also easily tricked, that I found you can just, I think it's like Shesha Prabhu that will say during chanting, like when the mind wants to do something, he'll say, okay, in 10 minutes, I'll let you do that thing.
Yeah.
And then 10 minutes will go by and he'll trick the mind into.
Yeah, his spiritual
chanting
procrastination. I love it. He's so amazing.
Yeah.
And he procrastinates all the Maya for his whole life. That's how he uses his procrastination tendency. It's brilliant.
I gotta adopt that.
It works actually. I did it in Mayapur for like a week, and then I decided to procrastinate the wrong way again.
What would you say to someone who has like a lot of attachment to, I guess, material activities, and like having peer groups within those things, like, I'm not articulate. Like what would you say to someone who has a lot of attachment to these groups and activities that seemingly gives them some sort of purpose or like a practice to do, while it also like, I don't even know what I'm trying to say.
Well, I can say this, that, you know, anything we do, you know, association is the key. We got to associate with those we want to be like, and we're going to be like those who we associate with. And that's 100% a fact. And so, you know, if you want spiritual life, you have to associate with spiritual people more and more exclusively. That's just a fact. That's just a
way to
fact.
burst my question. Like, so you have a lot of friends who are ignorant or very devout in their choices and path in life. Like, how do you still stay their friends without like you like having them negatively affect you?
You still respect them, you still love them, but you don't have to absorb yourself in their association. And that's part of that. I mean, that's just a spiritual fact that we can't avoid, that, you know, I have to do what's best for me. You have to fly your own ship, and therefore we have to seek that positive association. We have to, and it's a must. And in terms of, you know, because we'll be influenced. And so we have to use our intelligence and determine what is best for us, and then fly in that direction. Cora?
I want to expand on that, because I have felt over the past couple weeks that I feel like I'm sort of outgrowing some people in my life. They're also on a spiritual path, they do yoga and such. So I thought I could still be friends with them, but I feel like maybe I'm going into a different level of consciousness than they are, or just going in a different direction in life. but I just feel like I'm sort of just outgrowing them, and I don't feel very as close to them as I used to anymore. If anything, I almost feel a little annoyed sometimes when they call me or text me, and it's very strange to see that when maybe a couple months ago I wouldn't have been that way. But now,
There's nothing wrong with that. We don't have to criticize them or hate them. We don't have to associate with them. There's nothing wrong with that. That's natural. And we can choose that, that's just part of the way it goes in life, where vibrations are going to match each other. If you have a higher vibration, you're going to stop associating with those of a lower vibration, so forth. Okay. We'll turn this off. We can keep talking. Can you bring that video? I can take this out. This is looking too intensely now.